been on about 15 minutes and I've been rambling on to nobody because we have not been recording. So we will start again with the presentation. And again, if I somehow lose connection again for some reason, please just Andy or Diane give me a text. So I'll start from the beginning again and just letting everybody know again, my name is James Makoviak and I'd like to welcome you to the St. Louis Park and Hopkins virtual town hall. We do one yearly preview every year, usually at this time of the year, where we like to give people a heads up on what they can expect throughout the corridor. Of course, we'll do a little special focus here on Hopkins and St. Louis Park. Again, my name is James Makoviak. I'm an outreach coordinator. I've been on the project for about 8 years. I'm joined tonight by two of my other colleagues. We've got Diane Anastos, who's one of our new coordinators, who will be focusing more as she gets up to speed on the Hopkins St. Louis Park area. So if you are in contact with our office, you'll have a lot more contact with Diane. And then we have our subject matter expert here today, Andy Rikovic, and Andy is our construction lead on the east side of the project. As you know, we've got 14.5 miles to manage. In order to do that, we've divided up the corridor into 16 work segments, and there's a number of there's civil work and systems work that has to be completed in each of those segments. And so Andy is handling essentially Hopkins all the way to Minneapolis there. All right, just want to let you know as well that these proceedings are being recorded. We will then post this overview on our website for those of you who can attend tonight who would like to watch later, or you know someone who may want to watch a little bit later, and that'll also include a copy of the PowerPoint. So we will have that available for people who may want to download that as well. This presentation will take about 20 to 30 minutes. We'll try to go through it relatively quickly. We've got photographs, we've got some general information, and then we will leave about 10 to 20 minutes, or really as much time as necessary at the end of the presentation if folks have some questions and answers, questions, and we'd like to have a further discussion about anything. I'd like to also mention too that if you do have a question at some point, throughout the presentation that you don't want to wait till the end, feel free to please put that in the chat box. And I've got our colleague Diane is monitoring the chat box, and she will let me know, kind of break in and let me know there's a question there, and we will answer that question as appropriately. All right, that's kind of the general preliminary information. Again, I appreciate and welcome those of you from the public who've attended. And we'll get right to our presentation now that we're running a little bit late. I'm going to just share the screen here for a minute and put it back up. Right. And let's go first screen. All right. All right, for the last time, this is again the Hopkins St. Louis Park Virtual Town Hall Green Line Extension Update. It is April 26, 2023. And again, today our topics are going to be just a general project update, and then we'll go through 23 highlights, talk a little bit about the systems work, which has now begun in the western part of the corridor, as the civil work has been finishing about 98% through some of that civil work in Eden Prairie, Minnetonka. Brief communications and outreach update, and then again some questions, answers, and discussion. Familiar slide to those of you who joined us before, where you can see it's a fairly large footprint, right? Most construction footprints aren't nearly this large, right? People have apartment buildings and they're complex enough, but we've got 16 new LRT stations. You've got 44 significant structures. You can see a lot of the bridges that we've already completed. We've got at-grade crossings, miles of retaining walls, and of course, a lot of that is complex construction in new right-of-way from Eden Prairie to Hopkins, and then from Hopkins to Minneapolis. For about 7.8 miles, we follow the rail corridor, and we've been partnering with not only in our cities, but also with freight rail carriers in order to complete that construction. Again, familiar map or familiar slide to those of you who have seen this before. You can see the various stages of construction. The first year was essentially taken up with a lot of utility work, a lot of underground work. 2,000 or so public or private utilities had to be relocated, and then quite a bit of infrastructure we need to put underground before we begin what most people identify with as civil work, which is the third structures, track, and station. Second stage, of course, is the site prep, where we had to take a couple buildings down. We have a lot of easements. We have about 157 easement properties of various sizes that we had to obtain. And of course, and then we do the structures and track, and you see a lot of that work today, particularly in Hopkins and St. Louis Park. And then we will continue on in each segment with the systems contractor as the civil work in the segments is completed. We already start to see that now down, particularly in Eden Prairie, where you can see the catenary poles. We'll do some wiring there as well later on this year, and we'll show you some pictures of that later on in the presentation. And then finally, when all that is done, as you know, we're going to be focusing the next couple of years on a lot of the civil that still remains in the eastern part of the project. We still have quite a bit to do. We'll do the testing, which will take about 6 to 9 months. And again, as we have had some changes, some scope increases to the project that we had to include after, right? We finalized our contract after it went out to bid and the bid was accepted. We had to add a few things. Some of you may be familiar with those things, like some methodological changes at the Kenilworth tunnel, the town center station, the corridor protection wall. We've had to actually then revise the construction schedule, which of course then following on the heels of that is the system schedule, and they already were out to bid, and we had to revise that schedule as well. And then of course, when that's all completed, we've completed that, we're now in the process of supporting contract documents, and then we'll come up with probably a more precise project schedule and cost as we go. We like this slide. It shows sort of the local economic impact of the project. 69 is 87 counties. We have people working who are from those counties. You can see the numbers of people. You can see the large number of dollars that are being billed by disadvantaged business enterprises. And very proud of the fact that we continue to exceed our overall goal of 15% of contracts to DBE enterprises. All right, the highlights. We're going to start in Eden Prairie. Like I said, we thought it would be good to give you a broad view, so we'll go through the whole corridor, but we'll focus again a little bit more on Hopkins and St. Louis Park. All right, these are some of the things you can expect this year in Eden Prairie. Again, the biggest issue here, you can read through this, but the one I'd like to highlight, of course, is Phase 2 construction at Southwest Station. For those of you who followed that area, that construction, we've completed first phase, the largest phase of construction, and added a new parking ramp. We've got the new waiting area that's been completed, and we're in the process of transitioning Southwest Transit from their temporary station to the new station. And that should be completed, and they should be operating out of there with the bus turnaround loop starting on Monday. And that will be the signal to begin Phase 2, which is that area closest to Technology Drive, where we are going to put the new entry area, turnaround area, and drop-off area. And then, of course, the largest impact we have down there is we're rebuilding the Highway 212 off-ramp to Prairie Center Drive, which will take another couple months. And some details here for those of you who want to look back maybe at the presentation. Read through this. I won't linger here on this slide, but we basically are just trying to place some of those impacts and some of that work being done throughout the Eden Prairie portion of the corridor. And here are some of the photos. You can see the new waiting area I mentioned here down below, and that will be a joint waiting area when revenue operation starts. And it'll be a joint. You can see in this, you could probably see vaguely here, we've got both our logo and the Southwest Transit logo here. And that's the new parking ramp there that connects directly to the existing parking ramp, adding another 430 or so parking stalls. It'll be a total around 1,300 there. Here's the inside. I think it's a very sophisticated interior design here. It looks very, very nice. And they're looking forward to operating out there, as I said, on Monday. And of course, that whole Southwest Transit area has changed dramatically. You can see our bridge in the distance, the iconic water tower, for those of you who know Eden Prairie. And then, of course, the Elevate property. You've got a new strip mall to the right here. So over the last 5 to 6 years, there's been quite a bit of development in that area. And if you continue across our Prairie Center Drive bridge, you can see our Town Center Station bridge. That is actually not a drawing. That is actually a photo, which looks remarkably like the drawing we have shown for many years. It's nice to see that progress in real life. Continuing on over our Valley View Bridge, through past Flying Cloud into the Golden Triangle area. Just west of West 70th, you enter our Golden Triangle Station. And in the distance, you can see our Highway 212 Shady Oak Bridge. And this is looking at that same bridge from the other side. I like to always give a shameless plug here. The people you see in the foreground are a couple of people we had on one of our tours of that area every year. Every summer, we have 3 tours in every city where we take folks who are interested out into the corridor where they can see the construction up close in a way you obviously won't be able to when revenue operations starts. So if those of you who are attending or watching this are interested in that, we have our May tours. They're filling up quickly. Some of them are already booked, but we'll also have similar tours in July and September. All right, continuing from that area where those 2 folks were standing, we take a hard westerly turn along the south part of Highway 62 to our City West station, which backs up to the Optum campus. For those of you who know the area, and if you continue a little bit behind the person taking the photograph here, you enter into our first tunnel, and we go under the Highway 62 through the tunnel into the Minnetonka, into Opus Park. Again, some of the highlights of the systems and civil work this year in Minnetonka. Again, we'll continue to work on the Minnetonka-Hopkins Bridge. Most of Eden Prairie and Minnetonka are expected to be, the segments I mentioned earlier are supposed to be substantially complete and turned over by the civil contractor, and most of the systems work, electrical work, being done by the end of this year. So that work in that western quadrant is advanced. So we expect to have most of that done, but the Minnetonka-Hopkins Bridge from Smetana North to Hopkins will be turned over in 24. We've got quite a bit of work left there. And as you'll see throughout the presentation, we have a lot of work. Most of the work now, the civil work, is going to be focused on the eastern portion from Mount Hopkins to Minneapolis. The biggest traffic impact there, of course, is East Bend Road. For those of you who drove around Opus, my standing joke is, right, there are still people circling in Opus who we've never heard from again because it's such a complicated circuitous traffic pattern in there. But so any closure tends to be somewhat traumatic, but this one's going very well. We're closing East Bend Road for those of you who are in the area for probably another 8 weeks while we complete that road construction and try to finalize, our civil work so that we can, also the trails that we'd like to open by the end of this summer. And again, same map. Again, you can see where some of those impacts are, where some of the work is taking place. And again, another shameless plug for one of our tours. You can see the sort of the north side of 62 exit from our Highway 62 tunnel that started there at Eden Prairie. This is the beginning of Minnetonka here. And again, we'll have a similar tour this year where we'll be able to take folks into the tunnel house. And then just beyond, if you continue walking along the corridor beyond that tunnel, we have our Opus station. The tunnel, if you can see my arrow here, is down in this area to the south of that station where the photograph is taking place. And if you go a little bit north of the station, I like to show this picture. It's one of my favorite areas. You can see how dramatic some of the retaining wall construction is here. Just as a little sideline, for those of you who haven't been out on our tours and maybe don't know, when we were during the design phase, each of the cities had an opportunity to participate, obviously, in that design and had a lot of say. And we had a lot of locally requested capital investments, as we call them, or we call them as LRKIs. And these are special touches on the corridor, design touches that each city wanted really included in the project to enhance certain sections of the city. Down in Eden Prairie, you'll see, some of the light poles, or the rails will be, a higher grade railing. And here in Minnetonka, you see these walls, you see this print, this stamp, this concrete stamp where it looks like real rock. And it's a very complicated, 3-tone painting process. And so like all the LRKIs, the city helps raise extra money, and they put that into the budget, that we put that in the budget in our design phase, and then we do the construction. So anywhere in Minnetonka, that's kind of a characteristic element, construction element. And then as you continue out of Opus Park here, you can see Feltel Road on the left here. If you can see my arrow, that's we rebuilt Feltel Road, Smetana Road to put a bridge under both of them. To the right here, you can see, looking south from Smetana Drive, you can see in the Claremont, if you know the area on the left, you can see where we come out of the corridor to go under both of those bridges. And then if we go back to the photo on the left, you're going to the Minnetonka-Hopkins Bridge, which is the next photograph. That's the longest bridge in the corridor. You can see how high we had to go at some point here to go over the rail corridor, and then we land in Hopkins. And that takes us through Minnetonka. Here are some of the construction highlights that you'll see in Hopkins. And we can pause here if anybody has any particular questions. Do you have any chat questions, Diane? Anybody have any questions so far?
Any.
All right. All right. Sounds good. Thank you. Just let me know. So we'll pause a little bit here again. This is the first slide in our Hopkins series. You can see we've got complete stations pretty much at Shady Oak Park and Ride, downtown Hopkins and Blake Road. We've got complete the LRT track 20 this year, pretty much throughout that area. For those of you who don't know, I mean, we also have a major closure on KTEL and 5th Street. And there's several reasons for that. We're going to do some get a rail crossing there. We're reconfiguring the direction of 5th and KTEL. That'll be closed all season. That's probably the major traffic impact in Hopkins this year. But we're also extending 17th Avenue. So I think it's Avenue. I think we have street down there. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong for those of you who are residents there. But as you know, 17th Avenue, as I call it, goes by from downtown Hopkins to past the fire station. We're going to be continuing that, right? So it'll go a little bit south of Excelsior Boulevard, and we will go directly down and meet KTEL and 5th Avenue down at that point. So there's a lot of work that's being done there. And then, of course, systems will continue as well. So again, just reiterating some of the civil and systems work there. We got that utility and road work I mentioned on 5th and KTEL. We expect, we'd like to see the Minnesota River Bluffs Trail along that Shady Oak Station area around our construction zone to 11th. Hopefully we can open that, but if not, we'll get that open sometime early next year. And then we have some plaza work you may have noticed, again, down at downtown Hopkins. And I think I'd like to ask Andy if maybe you can just explain a little bit what's going on there for those of you who've seen that work and are wondering why we're doing it over again. Andy?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, we did receive some comments and some feedback regarding the activity at the plaza. Ultimately, the short answer is the visual appearance of the plaza didn't meet the quality expectations of the council or that of the city of Hopkins. After reviewing these concerns with the contractor, it was decided that the best path forward was to correct the deficiencies was to remove and replace the affected areas. So those are the activities that it's currently underway at downtown Hopkins Station Plaza.
Appreciate that, Andy. Thank you. There's somebody vacuuming in here. All right. Another thing I like to mention too, I got an email today about that, and somebody was implying that this is the reason why, we have extra costs on the project. And I just wanted to reassure everybody that, like any construction project, our priority is to make sure we deliver a quality product. And in this case, like if you ever had a subcontractor working in your home, if that product is not up to the contract specifications and it's on their dime to redo that. So this is not costing us any more money is the short answer. This is something a contractor is making right that wasn't up to the initial specifications. Would that be right, Andy?
Yep, that's correct, James.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right, appreciate that. Thanks for that overview. All right, again, we'll continue to work on Excelsior bridges. There may be some closures there near where you go underneath the bridge on Excelsior Drive. We've got some finishing work we have to do this, some painting, nowhere near the kind of delays that you saw last year. So we'll try to minimize those. The systems contractor will continue working. And then, of course, I mentioned 5th and KTEL is the largest impact. And then we've got one now currently on 5th Avenue South. And as I said earlier, we were going to have some intersection impacts near Excelsior Bridge when we continue as the season progresses with some finishing work on that bridge. And again, this is a map for just detailing out the locations of that work. And here's some of the photographs in Hopkins. You can see this is kind of our iconic project bridge here, the Excelsior Bridge. It's a unique bridge because not only the way it's constructed, it's a form traveler, which means it doesn't have necessarily bridge piers. It's got these foundations. And then this form traveler is a large piece of equipment where you start in the middle, right over top of these foundations, and you work your way out both ways. And eventually, the bridge connects between these foundations, as some of you may have witnessed over the last couple of years, is a very unique way of creating a cantilever kind of construction. And part of the reason we had to construct it that way was we had to get a certain height and a certain design. So we go from the south side of Excelsior, now we go to the other side of the track, of the freight rail track, but we also had to have it high enough where it could go, where the freight rail trains could go under it successfully. So it's a complicated, but it's going to be a very beautiful bridge, very unique bridge. I love the way it kind of just, you can see the swell of the bridge and the direction that it goes from one side to the other. And then, of course, this is standing at Pizza Luce, really, if you know that area where Blake Road would be behind you going south, and beyond that new development there, you've got Blake School, for those of you who know the area, and this is our Blake Station. Just to the north of that station, there's a very nice ped bridge, which goes underneath Blake Road. And of course, this development is probably important to note. That's over 800 new units being developed in this area here. And then, of course, behind us on the east side of Blake Road, you have another 800 plus units, and a very, very interesting development taking place there. I'd encourage those who are interested to see that to go on the Hopkins City webpage and see their new development. That one's the second one behind us. Here on this photograph has a very interesting waterway where there'll be, canoe paths for canoes and trail connections. And it's a very ambitious project that looks like a very nice development when it's all done. So we got quite a bit of development. In fact, with this development, if you just go down into Minnetonka and see the 5 projects there that are underway, and you add Elevate down in Eden Prairie, you have under construction just up to this stage of our corridor, something like 4,000 new units. So there's quite a lot of activity going on. And now we'll just pause a little bit, talk about trails. Trails are obviously an important part of this project. We're going to reconfigure a lot of the trail system we've already been doing. We've been very, very grateful for the patience of the bike riding community. Excuse me, and putting up with these closures. I know sometimes it's hard to understand when it doesn't look like any work is going on, but again, we just try to reiterate that we've had to break to do this project that's so vast. The footprint is so large. We've had to break that up into work segments, and when you give a work segment over to the contractor, right, they're managing resources over the entire 14.5-mile corridor. So they're kind of sorting things around. So we give them that work segment that factors into their thinking, right, in terms of sequencing and moving around their resources. And so while there may not be something going on at the moment, chances are there will be. So rather than open and close and open and close, we keep them closed just for safety purposes. It's not the most optimum, obviously, situation for trail users, but we hope that when we're all is said and done, you will see a much improved product there, and you'll be happy with the results. So again, we do thank you if you are a trail user, either pedestrian or a bike rider on there. If we really do appreciate your patience. I know one person that is really looking forward to the reopening of this whole trail system is our project director, Jim Alexander, who is a very avid bike rider and frequents these trails very often. So, but you can see here some of the target dates for when we will open, as best as we can, portions of that trail from the Minnesota River Bluffs to the South Cedar Lake Trail. Again, here's just a little overview. And on the photograph here, you can see in St. Louis Park over Beltline, you could see this really fine pedestrian and bike bridge, which is going to be a big improvement, as people will be able not have to navigate sort of the complicated traffic on Beltline, but they'll be able to go right over it. So you can again see the dates here, the different portions of the trail, and when we hope to have some of those open and some of those that are open for local use at the moment. All right, moving on from Hopkins. I don't know, Diane, do we have any questions about Hopkins before we go on to St. Louis Park?
I don't see any yet.
All right, thank you. All right, so moving on to St. Louis Park, again, you'll see some repetition in the structure of our presentation here. Here are the basic 2023 activities in St. Louis Park. You have the 3 stations that are completed. LRT track will continue. We completed our Southern Connector freight track around the Louisiana Station area. That's a big addition to the freight rail corridor. And then we're continuing some systems work in that area, but still quite a bit of civil work left, like I said, as we move east out of Hopkins. And here's some of the activities in the civil contract. We've got the Did I just miss that? All right, Beltline Boulevard. That's again, as those of you who know, is closed for Andy. Do we have any update on when that should reopen? Beltline Boulevard closure?
We're nearing completion over there. We likely have another 2 weeks remaining on that
All right.
closure.
Thanks. You can see the detour there on the right. And then for those of you who travel around Railroad Avenue, where Johnny Pops used to be, it's Nordic Wear facility. Now we've got a small closure there as well. And then we've got some upcoming impacts this year on Wooddale, Louisiana, and Oxford, and impacts near Excelsior Bridge. Again, as I mentioned earlier, intersection impacts. So again, I'll take this moment again, a shameless plug for our weekly construction update. You know, we go down to every 2 weeks because of the lack of activity during the winter, but in the summertime, you know, we're back up to our weekly schedule. And so you'll see that out posted every Friday afternoon. And that is the best place to consult ongoing work if you're for your commute, or if you want to know if work in your area, what's going on or what's not going on. So we'll continue to put that out throughout the summer and the fall. Again, an overview of where some of these impacts and some of this work is taking place in St. Louis Park. And again, as I reiterated, there's been quite a bit of investment. I mentioned the Blake Road development, the Minnetonka development, but you can see the Beltline St. Louis Park development here. You can see in total, we have over $2 billion in permitted and planned community development. And what's exciting about the development of the apartment complexes, as people move, as populations grow in certain area, that's, sort of the initiate, it creates the initiative for small businesses also to grow and move. All right, and here's the Louisiana station. And again, in the distance here, you can see that southerly connector, our freight rail connection. There's a very large retaining wall there. And also from the north side here, where old Sam's Club used to be here, to Oxford Street, which is just to the right of Louisiana Station here, we have a nice PED connection where we have a tunnel through this wall. And as I showed you earlier, that partial photo of our Beltline Boulevard LRT track crossing here, we have this LRT track bridge for pedestrians and bike riders. It's not open yet. We're trying to get that open as this segment is being completed. We do have a tour, I believe, upcoming this month of this area. For those of you who are interested in seeing that and walking that bridge, maybe think about signing up for that tour. And again, Wooddale Avenue, more development in the background here. We've got the Via Sol, and then on the right, of course, you see 36th Avenue. Behind you there is the Wooddale Avenue connection. All right, that's the end of the St. Louis Park portion. Do we have any questions yet in the chat?
Yes, when Ronald's asking when he's asking about the crosswalk at Beltline over Cache 25 or Highway 7, when will that be open?
So the crosswalk over is 25, or 7. Is Andy, can you handle that question?
If I'm understanding this, Beltline crosswalk Beltline to 7.
It says when will crosswalk at Beltline over CAS
It's on 25.
25
Yeah,
Highway 7 be open?
I would say that work was all done this past spring. I thought maybe I'm not understanding the location.
Okay, I know Ronald, if you're there, if you want to come on the line, if we're not answering that question, we'd certainly like to. Would you like to maybe clarify that for us?
Yeah, so there were new stoplights at the intersection of Casa or whatever it is.
Yep.
County 8 State Highway 25 and Beltline. But the bag buttons are taped off and there's no paint on the road yet. Crossing Highway 7.
Oh, the paint, yeah, the striping will get done this spring. So yeah, we still have striping to do at that location.
But the bag buttons are still deactivated.
Okay. I don't know the specifics about that, but I will verify that and get back to you on that if you want to just we can respond in this this chat at a later date here.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'm
that,
assuming
that work
this,
should have been all that work on CASA 25 and that Beltline intersection. We kind of wrapped that up this past fall. We had some miscellaneous signals work and striping left to do. So I'll just verify that. I'll just verify why those push buttons are inactive.
yeah, let me know if you get that here. You think you can do that at some point before the end of the presentation? Or does you need more time for that? Should we do that at a later date?
Yeah, we can just respond. We can respond
All right.
afterwards.
Okay,
Thanks.
sounds good. Thanks, Ronald. But I think the striping, of course, is weather related to some degree, right? We ran out of time last year before we could get that down because of the cold
Yeah,
weather.
that's correct. Yep.
Yeah, and so we've postponed that to this year, so it's on the spring agenda. And I imagine, I would guess, is it fair to say that those lights are associated with that striping, right, for safety reasons, and is probably they're somewhat related? Would that be fair enough? Maybe.
Yeah, that's a fair statement. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. Is that satisfactory for now, Ronald?
He's got one more question.
All right, go for it.
He's asking, will trees be planted along the bike trails?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. I think it depends on the city. I don't know. The only plans I think we have to replant some of those trees, project related, is related to the Kenilworth tunnel area. Once, of course, as you know, when that tunnel is complete, it'll be covered over. You won't, the train will be running underneath it, and there'll be a trail above it. But during the design phase, we realized that that was, a significant impact on that local community. So we had actually sought out a landscape developer, and this is about 5 years ago, and they put together some plans that I believe are part of our contract, which we will then make some additional landscaping changes to that area. I think some of that includes trees, but I can only speak to what I know down in Minnetonka, for instance. I get that question a lot. We removed a lot of trees down there in that corridor. And I know that each city that I know, and I know Minnetonka obviously, are very keen about, keeping green areas as green as possible and replanting some of those. So I know the city down in Minnetonka, for instance, and the Opus Minnetonka area has some plans, and I would assume the same thing is true in each of the cities. I'm pretty sure that, where that's possible, that's something that they might really be keen on. But I don't know anything definitive, Ronald, except the Kenilworth area. I don't think we have anything else in our plans that includes that.
Okay, he said he's going to ask the city council.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. Yeah. And again, if you find out otherwise, please feel free to reach out. Or for those of you who are, in attendance tonight and listening afterwards, again, you can always go to our webpage at, I'd like to just still go to gle.org. southwestlightrail.org is the fastest route there, but you can go through the Met Council network as well and get to our project page. And on that page, you can see contacting the project, and that brings up all the outreach coordinators, and you can see my picture and Diane's and our team there, and you have all our details if you want to reach out to us. And of course, you could always call our hotline. Our hotline is always available for really any reason, not just for emergencies. All right, well, continuing on, thanks again for those questions, Ronald. Appreciate it. In 2023, here's our Minneapolis activities. You can see quite a larger number of bubbles here, because again, as I indicated, we're continuing. We have a lot more work to do, civil work to do. Most of it is done in the east, but in the west, rather, we still have quite a bit to do in the east, and a lot of it around this corridor here. That's the West Lake Street, the 21st station. You can see there is quite a bit of work done. The station's West Lake Station in the distance here on the bottom left, you can see the Lake Street Bridge in the distance if you know the Secant Towers there. And we'll also have vertical circulation, or we call an elevator, from that station to make bus connections or trail connections for people who to that bridge or from that bridge. And then again, Secant Towers here on the right. You can hear is the Kenilworth Tunnel. Quite a bit construction there. We have our Secant construction going on there, and you can see some of the machinery there in that narrow corridor. And for some of you who are wondering, part of the reason the revenue operating date is in 2027. We've got our testing, our systems. We still have quite a bit of other work that still needs to be done throughout the corridor, but we also have quite a bit of work to still, about 50%, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on that tunnel. And because of the narrowness of the corridor and I think the complexity of the construction, you can only go at a certain pace. So it will slow down a little bit. Have work done on the north side and most of the work on the other side. And that'll probably be one of the areas we'll wrap up last with systems when we get that far. And some of you may have read about what we call the impediment investigation. And down on the bottom right, you could see that there was a superfluous portion of the old silos that the Secant apartments were built around that we ran into. We do thousands of borings during the design phase, collecting all sorts of information throughout the 14.5 miles. And we just missed this little corner here on the left, bottom left. And so when we were doing the Secant construction, we hit something and we did this investigation. You can see some of the stages of that in the photos above. And then it turned out to really have no impact, obviously, on the construction or especially on the towers. But you can see the portion of that concrete that we eventually cut off there. That's the actual impediment there you see on your bottom right. Nice photo, right? Deep down inside the bowels of the Kenilworth Tunnel. You can see, it's a very deep trench. It's a very complex construction. You've got, of course, down below the waterproofing, and you've got a big slab down there that I think is anywhere between 8 and 12 feet. And then that's the foundation, and then you have the structure, supportive excavation on both sides, and then the Secant construction. You can just see how complex it is. And for those of you who want to see that up close, we still have the best view available of that construction for a short time until Cedar Lake Avenue reopens this summer sometime. But we've had to put a trail, a passage across the tunnel. We had one earlier, a little bit north of where it currently is now, but you can actually stand out, right, overlook the tunnel and see finished tunnel to your right, or looking south, and you can see the ongoing structure, the complexity of the construction as you look north. So it's a great time to view that tunnel. We also have a tour of that tunnel, 2 tours, I think, coming up on that tunnel if you like to go down into that tunnel. Okay, and as I mentioned, we have our Cedar Lake Channel pedestrian bridge. That's the 3rd bridge. We had the rail corridor bridge, we had the light rail bridge, and now as we see the pedestrian bridge being built, and alongside of that, we call it the Works Progress Administration WPA wall construction. Cedar Lake Channel, this is an old historic wall. It was identified as historic property during the environmental process, and it was in a bit of a dilapidated state, a lot of it. And so we rebuilt it according to, I guess through the archaeology and through the historical records to try to make it look as authentic as possible. And that's nearly finished. And the next phase from Bryn Mawr to really the end or Target Field or the Royalston Farmers Market area, you can see, again, quite a bit of working on the Glenwood Avenue Bridge. There'll be some more closures as we move forward there. You can see here's the Bryn Mawr station in the distance above it. You can see if you look at my arrow, you can see the pedestrian bridge that will go to just south of 394 there to where there'll be a parking area there. And continuing down that corridor, there'll of course be a great trail alongside there, but that's the Bassett Valley station. And here's the Glenwood Avenue Bridge, very complex bridge. We had to build the Glenwood Avenue Bridge, and at the same time as a grade crossing, where sort of a crisscrossing of the LRT bridge with that new portion of the Glenwood Avenue Bridge. It's a pretty amazing construction. And then, of course, near the end, or the beginning, depending how you look at it, you can see our 5th Avenue, 7th Street LRT bridge. And of course, this is where we connect with the stem from the previous green line at Target Field in the distance. If those of you who know that area, you can see the Haywood Metro Transit building. All right, that's as far as we can go with our presentation for the civil construction. We can continue on to the systems construction unless there are any questions. Diana, any questions in the chat?
No.
All right, we will continue on then for the sake of time. again, you can see how much progress has already taken place down in the western quadrant of our corridor. You can see there, what I like to, these are very interesting pieces of equipment. I like to also highlight that because most of this work is done on the rail corridor, there is nowhere near the impact to the public when we get to this stage. Most of the equipment used is outfitted to run on the rails, the high rail system, big trucks and dumpsters and everything else that they need to transport the various elements of the systems project that are staged throughout the corridor. So it's a very low impact compared to our civil construction. Again, you can see the OCS poles, the electrical poles. The civil contractors already put in those foundations, and the systems guys come behind them and put in the poles, and we put the pole arms on. Of course, we have about 19 traction power substations. For those of you familiar with the other LRT lines, you've probably seen these. They're big, like container boxes, 40 by 10. They weigh about 47 tons. And it's all full of electrical equipment where the AC becomes DC and powers the alignment. They're basically staggered every 3/4 of a mile or so. And on the left here, you see we're back at Southwest Station, and you can see the far left has these small people here standing adjacent to the foundations that was built here, but is also being built throughout the corridor. And you can see the first traction power substation or TPSS station being dropped over that wall down onto that station about 2 weeks ago. And the second station here, we just went along the corridor. There were 4 that have already been installed. This is on the right. You see the station at Southwest Station. If you know the area, it's Costco in the background. And of course, we have the signal arms, and all of this equipment has already been delivered, and it's all up at a Golden Valley storage site. All right, communications and outreach update. Again, you see Diane on the screen there. Diane is one of our 2 new coordinators, and Katie Kurt is our other coordinator, and Katie will be focusing more in the Minneapolis area. And not only in addition to her duties down in the western outreach duties in the western quadrant, Diane will also be our tour coordinator. So she'll be handling that process, and continuing to make it more efficient. We like to make our tours more a little bit better for the public so that they enjoy them and they get the most out of them. I just want to mention too, as far as tours go, I mentioned we have 3 per city, but we also like folks to know that if you have a group and you'd like a tour anywhere in the corridor, we're more than happy to try to arrange that for you as well. It doesn't have to just be one of our sort of official tours. And this is you can see our spring town halls. We had our Eden Prairie, Minnetonka last week. Of course, today we have both Hopkins, St. Louis Park, and Minneapolis. Again, I mentioned our tours. You can see it's a great opportunity, if you like construction and you want to, do some walking. We take people out on our bridges and into the stations and through the tunnels, and you really get a great opportunity not only to see the complexity of the construction, but to also ask some great questions of our subject matter experts. You can see, Andy's counterpart, the Western construction lead, Hytham Ibrahim, here featured in this photograph here. And again, we'll have 3 tours next month, and then 3 more in July, 3 more in September. And again, I mentioned our hotline call earlier. Again, you're welcome to call that anytime. You can see the number of calls continues to go down, simply as I think people become more familiar not only with our project, but you'll also see in the next slide, as the hotline calls have gone down, the number of people subscribing to our weekly construction update has gone up. And so I think people are relying on that more as a resource. And so they're more familiar with what's going on, and we have fewer calls every year. But it's been a very effective tool. And, we still encourage people, for any reason, doesn't have to be an emergency, to give us a call. Okay, you can see as I mentioned, from 2019, the number of subscribers continues to go up, and our open rate remains steady at around 50%. And that is the official end of our presentation. So we'll take some questions and answers. If those of you who have any questions who've been waiting, please feel free to ask. If you'd like to ask any additional questions, please feel free to do that, and we'll see if we can provide answers to them. Anybody have any questions? Anything going on?
Nothing in the
Any-
chat.
Nothing in the chat? Okay. Well, if we don't have any more questions, again, we do appreciate so much you taking time to join us here tonight for this 2023 construction preview. Again, sorry for the little bit of the confusion in the beginning and the systems, the connectivity problems that we had. But again, thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight. And if you want any more information, you can see below our website, email, Twitter, Instagram handles below. And I wish you all a very good evening. Thanks again to my colleagues, Diane and Andy, for joining me tonight, providing support and expertise. And that is the conclusion of our presentation. Thanks again. Everybody have a great night.
Thanks, James.